Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Hey, Warren, how you doing, my friend? Nice to see everybody out there. You know, as I have pointed out, I have a lot of videos pre-recorded, watch reviews and the like, but these live streams are what I really enjoy, where we can interact with one another and talk about watch collecting because I'm just a collector like you, and I just like to talk, I guess. And as a journalist, I journalize my hobby. But I'm really glad that you decided to join this live stream today, whether you're watching it live or recorded. Please like and subscribe if you like any of what you see here. So, the topic today was used and vintage pieces, the considerations and the like. And I want to talk about the pros and the cons, not because some people like, oh, well, here are the things you got to be aware of. And yes, there are things to be aware of, but there are also positive things. Hey, how's it going, JF Omega? Always nice to see friends coming back to the show. But as I was saying, when we talk about vintage and used pieces, there are groups, there are bins in this, of course. There's no such thing as a simple, easy answer to anything. Hey, David, how's it going, David H? And there's the obvious bin when we talk about used watches, right? The obvious bin of used watches are like wristwatch check. I picked up a 41 ceramic sub from my local watch dealer. Um, was probably relatively new in box. Maybe the original owner wore it a few times, but I think they were looking to flip. So very probably nobody wore it before I did, but I bought it used, right? So there's used, and we're talking just relatively new used, and then there's used of a certain vintage, right? Like Breitling Navitimer. This is the old GMT with the Value 7750 based movement in it, right? Classic piece, classic collectible piece. They don't make it like this anymore. Not, I would say this is right at the edge of vintage, uh, but definitely collectible used, right? And then you've got the real vintage stuff like here we go. This is a Walkman flyback chrono. Now Walkman, among well, once you get to the a certain level of collecting, you start really looking into stuff. And Walkman was an American who imported parts from various vendors. Well, which is what people did back in the 70s. It wasn't a stigma to have a completely off the shelf built watch. The Tag Heuer Monaco. The only It's not like Heuer, and it was originally the Heuer Monaco. It wasn't that Jack Heuer said, "Hey, let me make a square waterproof case." A case vendor came to him and said, "Hey, dude, I've got a waterproof case that's square," and he said, "Let me get it." And then Steve McQueen said, "Ooh, that's a distinctive piece. I'm going to wear this in a movie so it looks really sharp on my wrist," and it does. So there was no stigma, and Walkman was eventually bought by the company that eventually became Breitling, and that's why some people call Walkmans like first generation Breitlings and the like. And Walkman has some really nice pieces. They made companies no longer in existence. That would be talk about brands being brought back. That would be an awesome brand to bring back. Would be Walkman, but they had a very nice calendar moon phase that I had one. The only problem is that 36 is about the smallest I would go with a watch, and that would only be a dress piece. And for a sports piece like those old Walkman triple dates, and they were really nice, and they are really nice. They just aren't made anymore. Um, but for a sports watch, it was a little too small for me. I do have like I said, I have two 36 millimeters. They're both Rolexes. So, um, but the thing is that is the other group of used watches, the vintage pieces. So one of the positive advantages of vintage pieces is that you can buy a 36 millimeter Rolex Datejust vintage for two-thirds the price of what a modern 36 millimeter Datejust would cost. So the advantage of one of the advantages of vintages is they're relatively inexpensive. The second is like I was talking about the Walkman, and this is a flyback chrono. Um, that's why it has the extra pusher. If you notice, it has three pushers. The bottom pusher at the no, at the 8 o'clock. The 8 o'clock pusher resets the totalizers because this was an inexpensive flyback chrono design, and it the totalizers just ran with the movement. So if you wanted to time anything, you had to zero the totalizers before hitting go. But buying used or buying vintage when it comes to quality pieces is not a bad thing. Like I wanted to use this as an example. I bought the case new, but the new case covers a set of three Mont Blanc steel. And I was lucky because, most people want gold, yellow gold. And I'm not a big yellow gold fan. The only yellow gold I have is my two-tone oyster quartz and my president that I recently picked up that belonged to my uh, deceased, rest in peace, father-in-law, and I bought it from my ex to prevent her from selling it to a dealer to keep the watch in the family. And that's off at a watchmaker right now to have a disassembly, cleaning, oiling, and reassembly because it's running very well right now. And now is the time because my ex literally found it underneath a refrigerator. Uh, After Heinz died, Anushka kind of got a little paranoid and started squirreling away there because they were restaurateurs. She was a German Yugoslavian, Croatian Yugoslavian immigrant to Germany who started as a waitress and got to the point where she and her husband, who was a butcher, he became the cook, she became the waitress, and they opened a small Yugoslavian restaurant in Wiesbaden, and they were quite successful. And that's why he bought this gold president. And after he passed, she closed the restaurant down and just lived in their home above it. To this day, she's still alive, tough broad. And my ex was going to sell this piece that belonged to this great guy, and so I offered to buy it. And so, but it's I put it on the time grapher. It's running 260 plus um, amplitude, and for a piece that you have not quite sure, because the thing about that Rolex is it could be running perfectly now, but the oils could be dried up in it, and something could seize up in the near future, and then it would need replacement parts, And so those are some of the things you have to consider when you're buying a vintage piece. There are a lot of considerations, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation. So let's see what we have going on over here. Gian, hey, how's it going, Gian? Arthur, hey, Arthur. Great topic. I've almost gotten a vintage Royal Oak once. The trouble with the vintage Royal Oaks is they tend to be small because back then 38 was big and 40 was comically big. Because I mean, I used to have a Breitling Chronomat, and I think it was like 38, and that was considered huge at the time. And so that's one of the other considerations. But if you have a wrist that can wear a 36, now is a buyer's market for vintage pieces because there are a lot of really good 36 to 38 millimeter watches out there from really high end companies like AP, you know? So it was very cheap for AP standards, so I couldn't look the other way, but it wasn't in great shape and would require lots of work. Didn't go for it. Well, Arthur, I'm going to bring that up in a moment about that's one of the other negative considerations is the maintenance. And I will bring that up in a moment, but I want to see, oh, take the curse off the washing machine. Haven't seen you in a while, my friend. Greetings. Just wanted to wind up. And the funny thing is I was really happy I was able to dodge the bullet and go to a watch show. I'll be at Watch Time Dusseldorf next week. So you'll see I'm going to do a lot of shorts. Every new watch that crosses my palm, I'm going to do a 1 minute short on so you can all see all the cool stuff I get to see. And then I'm going to try to do as many interviews with the CEOs and presidents. I'm really hoping to catch up with the president of Marathon again. We had a great interview last year, and I'll catch up with everybody, Formex and Philip from Fortis. I'm really looking forward to the Dusseldorf Watch Fair. I've already booked a hotel. I'm going to stay for the entire event. In the earlier years, I went for 1 or 2 days. I'm going to stay for the entire event. This time, I'm going to shoot a lot of video, have some really good content for everybody. I'm really looking forward to having some nice stuff for all of you. And but yeah, the maintenance aspect. Well, let me take the curse off the washing machine. You were saying greetings. Great way to see a lot of brands in person. Oh, just went to Wind Up in NYC. Yeah. See, I last week I had a whole episode about local watch events. Join your watch club locally. Go to local small watch events because if you think about it, if it's a local small watch event, you're probably meeting people from your local neighborhood and they're fellow watch people. So you can increase your circle of watch friends. It's very cool. A Alanzip Mark II. Would I consider the Tudor Heritage Black Bay to be a decent watch? Heck, yes. I used to have the old Smiley Black Bay with the red bezel and the curved, and I almost regret selling it. I don't miss it a lot, but I could have, foregone selling it, but I got a good price for it, so I can't complain loudly. But no, Tudor is when Rolex decided to go up market, they decided to make Tudor what Rolex used to be. Rolex used to be a company that made very reliable, very good value for money, premium, not necessarily luxury, but premium sports watches. And now Tudor is the premium sports watch company, and Rolex is the luxury watch company. I mean, even if you think about it, even think of this is a pretty blingy piece for something that's supposed to be a tool watch. Ceramic bezel and all that other good stuff, and the brushing is exquisite. I mean, the brushing on this bracelet and case is awesome. That's one of the reasons that they are, so successful at what they do. People decry Rolex and, denigrate Rolex and say all kinds of nasty things about Rolex. And I have personally a love-hate relationship in some ways with Rolex. But their pieces are flawless. They may be machine made and maybe only hand assembled and hand, tested and such, but test is half the industry. I mean, I run an engineering magazine. I'm the editor in chief of the IEEE Power Electronics magazine. And engineering isn't, I made a circuit magic in the first try. No, you create an idea and you assemble a circuit and you test it and there's something not quite right and you test it again and you change some components. And that's what any engineering is mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, chemical engineering. You're always tweaking the process to get to a better goal, but you need precision instruments and precision tools to measure. That's why, for example, Lecoq, the one of the the Jesu Lecoq, he developed the first instrument that could measure a micron, micromillimeter, and it had a fancy French name that basically means that. Watchmaking was the first industry to develop that level of precision. That tells you something. That's one of the reasons that horology is such a critical skill, because if we didn't have precision timekeeping, modern society would not even function. Right now, timekeeping is so important that it is a commodity today. The accurate time is literally beamed from the sky 24/7 now for free. And once upon a time, you had to pay. Or in the old timey days, you had a church clock that rang in the town, and everybody with a watch then zeroed on the church clock. So maybe it wasn't completely accurate, but at least everybody within hearing of that church clock had the same time, so they would be on time for their local appointments and such. Timekeeping is a critical thing. That's why the British conquered half the planet, because they had a contest. There's a book and a movie, Longitude. Accurate timekeeping enables precise navigation because north-south can be determined by a sextant. I even have one. I've shown it in episodes. East-west, since the Earth is a sphere, it's an arbitrary measurement, and we use timekeeping. How many hours uh, east or west of a set point? And there's a reason it's in England. Because once they developed an accurate clock that could be used on board a ship, they used it to conquer the planet. So let's roll back up. I love it when things scroll nicely. We means people are making comments. Um, but yes, to your comment, yes, the Tudor Heritage Black Bay is a great piece. Malad, hey Malad, and Johnny, Gian, I don't have much to talk about this topic, so I'll just lurk here and listen. Oh, I appreciate that you're willing. Well, the thing is that this kind of a conversation gives you more information when you decide to go and buy a vintage or a used piece, because used pieces give you the opportunity to do all kinds of things. You get to experiment with complications or looks or designs that you may not want to spend that kind of money on in a new watch. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be a watch. I picked this beautiful thing up. It's a pedometer. It's a pedometer. It's a little weight inside. You see that arrow moving? So sometimes I joke, I wear, a triple date, and I carry this in my pocket, and I tell people, well, what I have do that? I mean, okay, maybe not the blood alcohol, blood oxygen, Freudian slip, uh, blood oxygen or capture everything, sleep. But a pedometer and a good watch is a healthy combination, and you're off the grid and you know how far you went. So, hey, Chris, how's it going, my friend? Johnny, when buying a pre-worn, beware of fakes. Almost got caught a few times. Always bring your pre-worn to be examined by your watchmaker. You'll save time and money. Exactly. I actually have the tools to take off the back of a Rolex. And people say, what, do you service it? I go, no, I have the tools to take off the back so I can look at it and tell if it's real. Because some fakes are so good, the only way you're going to know is if you open it up. Because even the best fakes, unless they're using, and there are some fakes that I've heard, I've never seen them, but I've heard there are fakes that use stolen parts and all that other stuff. But it's not easy to make a free sprung balance, and Rolex uses a free sprung balance. Omega also uses a free sprung balance. Quite a few companies use a free sprung balance, and some companies still don't, and they're high end. because it's not easy. A free sprung balance, you have to use little weights around the perimeter of the balance wheel to adjust the speed, like a skater opening and closing their arms. That's spinning. You're increasing the angle of motion, I guess, or whatever the mathematical stuff. And I'm an electronics person, not a geophysical person, or whatever you want to call it. Um, but the fact is that that is one of the dangers of buying anything used, because you buy it new in the wrapper from the retailer, odds are it's not a fake. But once you start entering the realm of used, you can. Oh, I was gonna say I was really pleased picking this setup. I picked this entire setup, um, fountain, ball, and pencil for 500 euros. And then I bought a nice case for it. You can get some great deals on used stuff. Oh, by the way, you can also get some funny, stupid deals. I recently picked this up. It's a pocket watch that looks like the Death Star. It's like made of the cheapest pot metal I have ever seen. I think I paid $60 for it or something. And it has a music module, but it just plays classical music. I would have paid twice as much money if it played the Death Star March. But, what the heck? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So, yeah. So let's touch on the topic of the maintenance aspect, right? Think of I always like to compare cars and watches because there are a lot of parallels. So let's say, for example, a friend came to you and said, "Hey, I got a 911, and this is in look at it, it looks gorgeous." And you look at it and it looks gorgeous. The paint job on it is, and they say, but I need the money and I'm going to sell it for X minus 30% market value, you know, insert number there. But I'm saying this, so it's suspiciously cheap, but you even sat in it, you drove it, it feels okay, and you buy it. And then you realize that there are cracks underneath the A pillars because 911s notoriously, unless you have, that's why you see so many 911s have those stiffening bars connecting the shock absorbers in the front, because basically the front of a 911, because of the trunk, is just a box, and that's the front end of a sports car. So all of that swinging back and forth and torque, it cracks the frame right underneath they call the A pillars. Those are the front pillars that support the windshield. B pillars are in the middle and C pillars are in the back. But if you buy a used 911, always peel the carpet back and look at the metal underneath the A pillar, and a lot of them will have cracks there, right? So now someone sold you this car knowing that it's got serious body work in front of it, right? And that's one of the dangers of buying a watch. For example, I got my hands very cheaply, not very cheaply, reasonably inexpensively, my JLC Polaris Chrono. Now, some of you even complained about jumping minute hands on watches. The key is there's going to be some shaft gear lash, right? And what you have to do is when you're setting a watch and there is, if you notice any jumping gear lash, when you set it, you play with the crown a little and you find that dead zone where it's no longer jumping. And then when you push the crown in, it's not going to jump on you, you know, because I'm not going to mention names, but there are members who don't like watch brands specifically because of that. And I wouldn't have paid 9K for a watch and had to worry about jumping hands when I set it. Um, in fact, I just recently put this on the time grapher and it is in awesome shape. Uh, But the thing is you really have to know what you're doing when you're dealing with watches, especially when you're spending that kind of money, because you can make really expensive mistakes. And and very probably the person who sold it to me at a good price probably didn't know how to handle the jumping minute hand and decided to pass it off on someone else. But luckily, I know how to deal with it. Um, and there's nothing wrong with the watch at all. There's going to be some gear lash sometimes in the piece, and ironically, the more precise the piece, if there's any gear lash in certain parts, it'll exaggerate the jump. Um, but we're talking about serious issues, not something like that. Someone might have, for example, a used piece and maybe they own a time grapher and they've noticed the amplitude has dropped off a lot and the watch is still running well. Time to sell and pass the problem on to the next person, or so you buy the 911 and maybe there are no frame cracks, but it needs new suspension in the next 10,000 miles or a new exhaust or it's easy to buy a watch and then turn around and realize that maybe it wasn't the deal you expected it to be. That's why, for example, whenever I buy a used piece, I always factor into my mental math how much it would cost to have it serviced out of the box right away. Like I this yellow president I just bought. I sent it off to my watchmaker to have it, disassembled, cleaned, oiled, and reassembled because I don't want any problems with it. It's been sitting for easy 20 years, and modern oils don't oxidize and dry up as easily. But we're talking about a watch that was serviced the last time maybe in the late 80s. The oils back then had maybe a 6 to 10 year shelf life at best. So it's worth spending. And the nice thing about a Rolex movement is you don't have to have an AD look at it. A good watchmaker can service a Rolex movement. And it's going to cost me 300 to 500 bucks, which is not an inconsiderate amount of money. But for a watch that is worth upwards of 14, 15K, it's a completely valid investment to ensure that the value of the watch is maintained. And the watch is getting old and it's got patina on the face. And I told him, I said, I don't want him to mess with the face, but I wouldn't mind if he dusted it with a fine haired brush and cleaned the inside of the crystal to get rid of the oxidation byproducts that outgas from the face as it ages. But I don't want them to change it. I want it to have that patina still. I just want the dust to be removed. And so buying used pieces, you have to consider how much would it cost to be fixed if there's a catastrophic situation with the piece. For example, I had a Datejust. I bought the Datejust and I wore it for a while and it turned out the oils had dried up in it and I had to replace one of the winder gears. You know, you don't want to have a Rolex repaired and have it need parts. And yet I had to eat it because I at that point I didn't trust the guy who sold it to me. Not that I didn't wouldn't trust him to fix it, but he would be defensive and it would just not be. And bought other pieces from him. This was just I don't think he was aware of the nature of the piece. He probably would have made good, but sometimes you got to make sure it's taking care of yourself. And what I do when I'm not happy with a purchase and I have to have it serviced, once I have it serviced and I know it's got a guarantee on it, I sell it because then that way I can sell it with a clean conscience. It's been serviced, it's got a guarantee on it, and I don't have to have those evil memories anymore. Let's see. Arthur, the sub is a classic. I agree, my friend. It really is. Johnny, gradually falling for Tudor's Ranger. It's not a bad piece. I would say though, if you were really tempted by the Ranger, look at the North Flag. The Tudor North Flag is such an it was the first Tudor to have a display back with their in-house movement, the North Flag, and it's got a um, power reserve indicator, and it's a sports watch. If you're interested in the Ranger, look at the North Flag first. That would be my advice. And they're about the same value, even though they don't make the North Flag anymore. It retains its value well. I think it's probably between 3 and 4K. You can find a North Flag. But I would look at the North Flag. If you're tempted by the Ranger, get the North Flag. You're getting a very collectible Tudor in the North Flag, and it's really a nice piece. I think about it all the time. One day I might do it. But although yesterday I was slightly in my cups and I made an offer on a Tag Heuer Carrera 2 Skeleton GMT, and it's gonna blow the rest of my war chest for the remainder of the year, I think. But it's a worthwhile piece to acquire if you're into complicated watches, busy pieces. Um, what do I think about the new IWC Engineer? Right? Arthur says, well, you love it, but it's a little overpriced. And well, see, that's the problem is that all of these companies think they deserve the money too. And IWC, I own an IWC myself. It's currently at my shop. I was trying to sell it, but I can't get the money I want for it. IWC doesn't retain its value. And for me, instead of selling it, I'd rather keep it because I got a couple of trips. Ironically, I was like, I'm not going to even plan to go to the States this year. I just got invited to go to Fayetteville for a silicon carbide factory um, thing. I mean, it's actually it's actually big. Otherwise, they wouldn't be flying me literally at the last minute there. But it's a big announcement in the silicon carbide space that I can't really give the details of it this time because there is some press embargo kind of thing on it because of the magnitude of the news. Because I've been telling people a long time. You can look at earlier episodes of the show. I've been saying it. We are in the middle of a power electronics revolution. The average person doesn't even know it because the average person doesn't even know that in the last 20, 30 years, because it takes about 20 years for a product to go from concept to real production, commercial availability. And that's what's happened now with semiconductors, all right, transistors. There's a technology, they call it wide band gap semiconductors. And these are materials that are literally 3 times better at being semiconductors than silicon is. The only problem is new technology, it's expensive, blah, blah, blah. And we're getting there. We're getting there in leaps and bounds. And because of that, that's why your power supply on your phone is that big now and it's 60 watts instead of being that big and being 10 watts. In fact, a lot of power supply companies tout that they have this material. One of them, there were two. One's called silicon carbide, the other one's called gallium nitride. And there are a lot of companies that actually tout that they have gallium nitride phone chargers because this is a very good technology. And it makes for very highly efficient electronics. And that's the key because the it's not how big the battery is, it's how much energy you're using. And the same with the grid. If we all had things that used a tenth of the power, 10 times as many people could use those things, couldn't they? So let's go back to mechanical because my day job is electronic. I got to finish the column for the December issue. I've been procrastinating all week and tomorrow's the deadline. So we're going to do it. But Arthur, that's what I thought about the Engineer. I think it's a nice piece, but Yeah, I still am a Pilot fan, and I own a Pilot. And if I were going to buy a new IWC, I'd buy a Pilot Chrono. I used to have a Pilot Chrono. I love them. I would probably actually, again, I was saying about vintage can give you some really cool pieces. I would buy a vintage IWC Pilot Chrono because those are nice pieces, and you can pick one up for about $5,000. Which is not an inconsider, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but it's also not break the bank money. You save yourself a couple of years, you could buy yourself, my father used to say, if you can't save $10,000 a year by eating beanie weenies and not going out and partying and such, you don't deserve, because he was a self-made businessman and he died running his own business. Um, Worked for himself. Once he made the money to buy his first franchise, Sunoco gas station and garage, which is why I'm used to be a mechanic. I don't consider myself a mechanic anymore because of electronics, but I can fix anything made before 1990. But once he, bought that gas station franchise, Sunoco, he worked for himself until the day he died. But back to IWC, great Pilot pieces. I'm not a big I'm not a big fan of the engineer, but it's a nice piece. Let's say it that way. Um, Carrera, how's it going? Do I think I would be as interested in horology if I had been born in the generation having smartphone and watch from the get go? Probably not. I'll be honest, probably not. Um, One of the things about people, we're shaped by the generation we grew up in. Because, like, when I was a kid, we thought people who listened to Lawrence Welk music were old people. But if you go to an old age home today, that granny's rocking out with Mick Jagger. It's the music that you grew up with. And we consider today Rolling Stones as elevator music. So it depends on where you come from. And my passion in horology initially came from when I had my first communion. I went to Catholic elementary school. I went to Jesuit high school, and then the U.S. Army. I guess nothing changes. Um, and my mother gave me a Timex, simple three-hander, white face. Well, the current equivalent would be a $50 Timex. And she gave it to me for my communion, second grade, little kid. Ooh, what adults have. And it just fascinated me with timekeeping. And in fact, in seventh grade, I did a science fair project on how the seconds, how finely the second was split affects horological accuracy. And it went to state, and it was just me with some clay models of watches explaining how different timekeeping worked. In fact, quartz watches didn't even exist then. And I thought I had it here handy. I guess I don't. I wonder where I put it. Maybe it fell. No, that's the, it, couple fell. Yes, it fell. Um, this was one of the pieces I described. This is the Bulova Accutron. I guess it needs a new battery because the hand's not moving. Oh, no, the hand's moving. There we go. See, the funny thing about the Accutron is that even though it is an electronic watch, there's a mechanical linkage from the tuning fork to the mechanism, so it can literally become synchronized, and you can knock it with your knuckle and it will start sweeping again because there's a little fine hairspring coming off of the tuning fork with a sapphire on it going to a microscopic gear. Not well, the gear is not microscopic, but the teeth. And a lot of people were amazed that Bulova was able to machine the gear that finely. And so you have a 360 hertz tuning fork. It hums. I guess you can't hear it through the microphone, That would be cool. But went to state just talking about how, and that's why I didn't go further because if I had built an escapement out of like spaghetti or something, that would have probably gone farther. But but yeah, my interest in horology comes directly from a watch I was given as a child. When I was in the military, I was a big fan of electronic watches and pieces and such. And in fact, well, back then you could get away with it. I was stationed at one point at a Army Security Agency field station in Augsburg. They tore it down, so I can the antenna is still there because it's so huge. Pilots use it for guidance, so they couldn't tear it down. But when I was stationed there, I used to go into the comm center wearing quartz pieces and the latest stuff from Seiko and from Sanyo and stuff, database calculators and stuff. But back then, nothing had radio, so they weren't worried about anything being beamed out of the comm center. Today, you wouldn't be allowed anywhere near the entrance of a skiff or a secure compartmented information, something or other, or a comm center. You wouldn't be allowed anywhere near even the entrance with anything electronics nowadays that they didn't screen, vet, take apart, put back together, break accidentally. Yeah, yeah. But speaking of vintage and used, you could buy some cool old vintage calculator pieces or computer watches from the day, or like the old Seiko TV watch. Sony made a TV watch at one point too. Seiko made a computer watch. There are all kinds of electronic vintage pieces out there that are worth quite a lot, actually. So there are a lot of ways. There are pluses and minuses. You got to factor in the repair costs. You have to think about the maintenance. Even if you get one in perfect condition, it's a 50, 100, 200-year old piece. I've got a my repeater. I'm so upset. It didn't even fall very far, and the case is popped open, and so I got to take it to a watchmaker because I don't want to try to bend shit back together myself. Um, Vintage pieces aren't a modern piece uses modern technology. A vintage piece uses vintage technology. It's not going to be as accurate. It's not going to be as reliable. It may need more maintenance, all kinds of stuff like that. You have to really think about it. And that's why I always say education is your friend. While you're saving up, research the piece, research the genre, research the complication. If you're buying a moon phase, look into moon phases. If you're, look into all of the aspects of horology. The more knowledgeable you are, the less you will be upset when you buy a piece because you will have done your due diligence and you will have made sure you can handle the repair cost. There's not a lot of upfront loading on the piece. It really is in good shape. You maybe took it to a watchmaker if you can. Chrono 24 now offers vetting service on everything now. You have to pay extra and they send it to Chrono first before it comes to you, but it goes through someone else's hands who at least has the skills to vet it for you. You know, forewarned is forearmed. Vintage pieces are a great way. Not just vintage used pieces are a great way to buy uh, excellent watches and great horology. My Nicholas Rusek I bought used. I bought the metal bracelet aftermarket, and it completely changes the you know demeanor of the piece. But I bought this from a person I trust, and this thing runs like the German trains used to. Jean, hey Miranda, how's it going? Jean, Johnny, the Ranger's dial is its beauty printed rather than applied, but the printed dials are more difficult to put loom in than the applied markers. Well, you could make the print out of loom. IWC does a great job. And when I get my IWC back from the shop, I'll hold it up too. IWC does the best plain dials in the industry, in my humble opinion. or not so humble opinion. Johnny, already mechanical are getting obsolete. Trying to find a clocksmith is mission impossible. Getting harder to find competent watch guy with various complications. Well, I I get you, but there are still people out there. Like when I had my Omega Speed Sonic serviced, I had to send it to Tokyo, but it got serviced. There will always be someone, I shouldn't say always, but for the foreseeable future, there will be someone who can fix what you have. You might have to mail it somewhere. You might have to pay a little bit. That's all of those things you have to factor in, right? You know, that's why, for example, it's better to buy a Value 7750 based movement watch, even if you're a watch snob, because there are parts for it everywhere, right? I have several pieces that are 7750 based. My Navitimer is a 7750 based. My Longines is a 7750 based, the 7751. The Breitling, I forget the model number for the Breitling. This is the PRX Chrono is a Value 7753. You know, there's no stigma in having an off the shelf movement because an off the shelf movement is repairable for the foreseeable future. There are always going to be parts for 7750 series Value chrono movements out there, for example. Oscar, hey, Chris. The good thing about used watches, you can buy pretty much every watch as you're closer to its true market value. Exactly. There are a lot of pieces I wouldn't buy new. I mean, for example, I was talking about, and Chris was with me when I picked up the metal bracelet for this piece. I paid 5K. This thing retails for nine and change. The current version of this watch retails for over $10,000, and I paid five for mine. If you buy used, you're going to get a good price, and sometimes not even used. I was very lucky. I got my, and Chris was with me when I got this. I had one miss. I'm really upset that I sold it, and I saw this. I got it 30%, almost 35% off at the dealer, but they were clearing. You got to keep your eyes open for deals, and the more you know, the more you can appreciate a deal, the more you can assess the value of a impulse opportunity, right? Because that's the problem with an impulse buy is you buy it and then you regret it because you didn't think all of the ramifications through. The more you educate yourself about watches, the more you have an understanding, the easier it is to have that kind of like gestalt grasp. You look at a piece and you go, "That's a nice watch. Oh wow, yeah, I might have to have that looked at." You know, you turn the crown and it feels a little gritty, or it's a flyback, but when you push the button it's a little mushy, or the hand doesn't bounce back clean, maybe the hammers are dirty or something. But the more you educate yourself, then oh yeah, there are little hammers that do that against cams, and how that all works together. Like, um the more you can educate yourself, like I said, the time you take while you're saving for the piece, do your research. And you might change your mind, but the more you know, the more forewarned is forearmed. Miranda, I buy used expensive things only in my area of expertise. I don't know if I said hi, but hi, Miranda. Uh, no, so no used watches for me, but that's okay. I know a lot of people who would never touch a used piece, and that's perfectly understandable. Just like cars, I know people who would never buy a used car. If you can afford it and the watch you want is within your reach, buy it, whether it's new or used. But if you can get a watch, well, there are advantages to a new watch. It comes with a factory warranty. No one's ever had their grubby fingers on it, unless it's a display piece. Um, Comes in a nice box that hasn't been smudged or dinged yet, A lot of things, a lot of things, you know? But there are advantages to buying new, but there are a lot of advantages to buying used. But you have to be careful when you buy used. That's the thing. I mean, you have to be careful when you buy new, but there are different concerns there. David Gines Genas. I don't know how. I apologize if I mangled your last name, but Daniel, love my Tudor Black Bay 5839. That's a nice. Oh, in blue. That is a nice looking watch. Bought a bullet bracelet. Ooh, nice. See, I always encourage people to play with bracelets and straps because it really changes the watch. I keep going back to this was like, you know, a bad high school movie. This watch was so prim and proper with the leather. You put it on the metal and bada bing, party. Let's go party somewhere. It really does change the nature of the piece. Like the El Primero comes on a black leather, but I put it on a blue alligator with white stitch to sporty it up a little, but still keep it, cool. Wear it with a jacket, wear it with a polo, but the blue makes it more accessible than the black would have. And the blue also plays off of the blue totalizer subdial face. Always play with straps, my friend. Kudos to you. Johnny, lots of early Swiss quartz were printed, yet loom was good. Today we're spoiled with various supply. Yeah, we are spoiled. The tech is so good today. Hey, Peter, how's it going, my friend? Always nice to see you, Peter Katza. Little late to the party today, but always glad to have you here. Speaking of 911s, I wish I had the funds I had one in the driveway. Well, then depends on how you look at it. I was a mechanic, so I never owned a 911, but I've owned over the course of my life, I've owned two 924s and three 944s. I'd buy beat up 924s and beat up 944s, and they're very simple cars to maintain. They really are. There's a reason they have a cult following, and I would fix them up until I could and drive them around until I couldn't fix them up anymore. But I always made sure I finished it well. And I used to have a car stereo install shop, so I always made sure I had some thumping tunes in it. And I joined the local Porsche club and drove it like a crazy person with the stereo on high. But never owned a 911 myself. But I've owned some nice watches. Oh, and everyone's saying hi, Peter. Miranda, I would buy used. Well, if like I said, do your due diligence. And from you, well, I got a couple of pieces. If you want me, I'm email you some stuff, pictures of some of the pieces. I'm actually trying to sell. What am I trying to sell right now? Trying to sell right now. If you're interested in a Nomos Neomatic 42, it's for sale. I actually sold this to a person and bought it back, but they lost the box and papers. I've got this World Timer Frederic Constant for sale, and I'll give you a discount because it's no box, no papers, but I was the original owner. What else do I have that I'm trying to get rid of? Move along, let's put it that way. Um, I would, I would, I would sell. I'd sell my Tissot, but the thing is that the watch is only worth about 1,500 only. But which it's almost not worth selling because you always want a nice watch to wear to places where you may not want to wear something nicer. Which is actually what the Nomos has fallen into the role of. The nice thing about having nice pieces that you're trying to sell is if you can't sell them or sell them for the price you want, you can always keep holding on to them and they're still nice watches. Oh, Take the curse off the washing machine says, I frequently check out my local thrift stores looking for either a valuable or interesting piece that slipped through their cracks and ended up on the shelf for cheap. So far, no dice. Well, the problem is that everybody has the internet now, and you can use even Google Lens. So even if you don't know anything about something, you take a picture, you click Google Lens, and it will tell you everything it can find about it. And a watch, because it is just a very specific pattern, it's easy for Google Lens to go, oh yeah, it's worth anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. So you're gonna find the odd piece, but it'll usually be in like a grab bag from an estate sale or something where it's a bulk of something and someone's just scooping it up to sell, or bankruptcy sale, or what I mean, something police seizure, something where it's just a bunch of stuff, and if you're lucky, there's something of value in there. But nowadays, the little old lady with the $10,000 Rolex, if she has anyone in her circle of friends under the age of 35, she's going to know what its value is. Hey, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Carrera, I just got a Sunoco tattoo. Oh my goodness, very cool. Like I said, my father owned a Sunoco garage and gas station, and I used to pump gas and fix tires and stuff like that, change exhausts. Uh, Curse off the washing machine says, not watch related. Where was the Sunoco station? I assume somewhere in Queens. No, he was in Brooklyn on the Conduit Boulevard. There was a near Pitkin Avenue, Conduit Boulevard, Pitkin Avenue. There was a Burger King there. So if you knew of a Burger King, Conduit Boulevard, Sunoco station, that was my father's gas station. He's passed, and after my parents divorced, he wound up going upstate to Big Indian, and then he wound up in San Diego, and then he wound up in Miami. But when I was growing up, he had a garage and gas station in South Brooklyn on the Conduit towards Kennedy, which was a good location for a gas station. Trap Vision. Hey, Trap Vision. Johnny, funny to see I gave an old mechanical pocket watch to a young engineer. He was so amazed at the small mechanical magic. Very cool. Teach the youth. One UCLT. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Ball breaker tongue. Hey, editor in chief stumbled across my new headshot in the IEEE Power Electronics magazine. I look I had it. It was a professional photo. Oh, okay. I had this picture made professionally because uh, I told all of my columnists that they had to update their pictures because we're going to increase the size of the columnists' photographs. And so I went ahead and I had a professional picture taken of myself. And at least people can see that I look like I know how to spell. But yeah, and I'm wearing my Omega Globemaster annual calendar, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful suit watch. But yeah, thank you for noticing. It warms the cockles of my heart to know that my audience follows me in different venues. Just putting, I have to do the column for the December issue by tomorrow, and I know what the nice thing is I already know what I want to say. I just have to do the physical typing stuff. But Johnny, always fun to see youngsters seeing a slide rule for the first time. I own one of them myself. Well, the outer bezel on a Navitimer is a slide rule. The C&D scales, um, which brings out Breitling's. Oh yeah, boom! I'm sorry, I didn't finish reading through, and I mentioned Breitling's bezel calculators, which you mentioned, smart friend. Uh, Gian, Point well taken on the IWC printed dials. So we are at the top of the hour. I have to write that editorial tomorrow. You all take care. Have a fantastic week. And most especially, have a great evening.